Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Future with Restoring Eden Ministries. So today we are going to look at 5 things to expect for the year 2023. There are many things that are going to be happening next year, I believe, that will just focus on the 5 that I think will impact us directly and that we have to prepare ourselves beginning from now. And all this I'm saying so that we cannot just be aware of what is coming next year. But I'm saying this to stay us up in our faith, to say, let me prepare myself spiritually. Let me fix my altar. Let me go back to my worship. Let me pursue intimacy with God. To know all these things without pursuing intimacy with God, it's pointless. So all these things I'm sharing to provoke you to more intimacy with God, to more closeness with God, to more hunger for God. So that's what I'm hoping, you and me, to grow in our intimacy with God and in our worship to the Most High God, Yahweh. The first one is food availability problem. This thing, I've been saying it ever since September, that 2023 is going to be a food availability problem. And I am not alone who've been saying this. Let's listen to Gonzalez.
The acceleration of already high food, fertilizer and fuel prices has triggered a global crisis that could drive millions more into extreme poverty, magnifying hunger and malnutrition, while threatening to raise the global humanitarian caseload to new highs and erase hard-won development gains.
Food pricing is our #1 problem right now as a result of all this perfect storm for 2022. But 2023, it very well will be a food availability problem.
So this thing, he's not joking when he says it, that there's going to be a food availability problem. I was watching COP27 and he spoke again about this food availability problem. We need to prepare ourselves for next year that there's going to be a food availability problem, that there are going to be food shortages in our supermarkets. And remember, like I said, that this food availability problem or food shortage problem is not necessarily that the world does not have food, but it's because of the narrative of Mystery Babylon, that she creates this narrative to propagate her agenda. So what we need to do ourselves is to prepare ourselves for it. So I ask myself a question. I ask you a question. Are you ready for a food availability problem? Am I ready for food shortages for 2023? And how do I get ready for that? I prepare myself the way Joseph prepared himself. Joseph said that, King, when we are still in the years of plenty, let's use 20% of the plenty to store it away. So also we should store away 20% of the plenty that which we have in our houses. You use that 20% to buy food that lasts long, that will make you manage to go through the tough year that we are going to encounter next year. You buy tinned stuff, you buy canned food, you buy grains, because grains, they are long lasting. We teach ourselves to cut off from luxury items. We train ourselves to survive on bare minimums. Whatever it is that is of luxury, I must train myself to let it go. I must prepare myself to eat food when there is no meat. So that's how I will train myself and prepare myself. How prepared are you for a food availability problem? Will you be able to face it? Do you have some foods which you have stashed away somewhere for you and your family, so that you must be able to live without depending on the supermarket system? We need to train ourselves to get out of the supermarket system, because Gonzalez is not joking when he's saying there will be food availability problem next year. This is the script that they gave to him, and he is going to make sure that it transpires. So the second point is when the money fails. I call it when the money fails, but Jamie, he calls it a hurricane, Please listen to what he says.
It's a hurricane. Right now it's kind of sunny, things are doing fine. Everyone thinks the Fed can handle this. That hurricane is right out there down the road coming our way. We just don't know if it's a minor one or Superstorm Sandy or Sandy or Andrew or something like that. And you better brace yourself.
You see, he says you better brace yourself. Brethren, we better brace ourselves that this hurricane is going to hit us. And he was talking about next year. He was talking about 2023, that there is a hurricane that is coming. We better brace ourselves. The width of the money and the value of the money which we have now, we are going to soon discover that is going to evaporate next year, because Mr. Babylon is pushing the agenda of when the money failed, people went to Joseph and they sold themselves as slaves. You know, Mr. Babylon, remember the Bible says that he's got human souls. There are people who are going to sell themselves to Mr. Babylon. So this environment of money failing is going to be propagated and propelled next year.
There's a new study by the World Bank that says the globe may be headed towards a recession next year, along with a string of financial crises in emerging markets. Joining us right now to talk about it is World Bank President David Malpass. And David, it's really good to see you.
Very good to see all of you.
Let's talk about this global recession. The World Bank says that we could be headed into one. How severe is that recession? What's it look like?
It's sharp right now. So if we think of the second and third quarters of this year, the big downturn, part of that is China, but it's really most of the world. Maybe the U.S. is having a softer feel for it. And my concern is that it goes into next year. A lot of the factors are persistent. The inflation problem is one of them, low productivity. And for developing countries, this is a really harmful environment, especially as you look at their investment prospects out into the future.
The Bible says, Genesis, when the money failed, people went to Joseph and they said, buy us as slaves. Why should we starve when you can buy us as slaves and we serve you and you give us as grain? So that is what they want to create. They want to create an environment where the money fails so that we can say, buy us as slaves. So we have to be strong on this. We have to be able to say, I am training myself to live outside of the system so that I can be able to survive without the system, so that I may not be one of those who go and give their souls to Mystery Babylon. So that's the second thing that is coming next year, a financial hurricane or the money failing. The third thing that I observed when I was watching COP27, everyone was the environment, climate change, going green. It's as if this climate change is becoming a new religion. I mean, let's listen to Nancy Pelosi.
Good afternoon, everyone. And it is a good afternoon because we're all here gathered to be good stewards of God's creation, to protect our planet for future generations and for the present, to do so in a way that brings equity, inclusiveness, diversity, to creating our solutions, and to do so in a way that is safe and secure for the globe and for the world. If you believe as I that this is God's creation and we have a moral responsibility to be good stewards of it, then we agree. And even if you don't share that religious view, we all know we have a moral responsibility to our children.
They are peddling this story of climate change. And like you saw in the previous video with Pope and his 10 commandments, so out of those 10 commandments, what they're going to do is that they're going to introduce laws. So what is going to happen is that climate change laws are going to be enforced and they're going to be extreme on it next year. For an example, should they say that we are not going to work on a particular day of the week, and then you decide to go to work, there are going to be hefty punishments and repercussions that come your way. It's not going to be easy for anyone who just say, no, for me, I'm not for this green movement thing. So that's the third thing that's going to happen. The issue of climate change is going to be very strong, and they're going to bring about laws that restrict us, that we have to obey with this plan of climate change. And should we refuse to obey them, we will be labeled as rebels, literally speaking. And being rebels as we will be, there will be payments that which we would have to pay in order for us to continue with the system. So we must just brace ourselves for that. The fourth one is blackouts. Here in South Africa, we used to black out, but the blackouts are going to be common next year. So we must buy things that are able to give us light, that are going to give us fire, even without electricity. We must prepare even to an extent of going without internet for some time, because it's not only going to be electrical blackouts, but internet also, bank systems. We're going to have a lot of blackouts next year. Okay. And the fifth point is that next year they are launching the Abrahamic Family House in Abu Dhabi. So basically the Abrahamic Family House, it's a convocation of all religions coming under one house. Let's just listen to this.
Religious history was made in Abu Dhabi last year when the document on human fraternity was signed by Pope Francis and Dr. Ahmed al-Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. It called for tolerance, universal peace, and the reconciliation of all faiths. Embodying this agreement, this year construction will start on a project called the Abrahamic Family House on Saadiyat Island. Due for completion in 2022, the site will house a church, a mosque, and a synagogue.
In the UK, the British Museum's Living with Gods exhibition holds artifacts of worship from numerous faiths. In Paris, the Louvre contains a gallery of around 3,000 Islamic art objects. And in the Middle East, shortly after Pope Francis's visit to the UAE capital in 2019, the Louvre Abu Dhabi launched a universal religions wing, featuring Jewish Torah scrolls to a medieval Bible, a North African blue Quran, and Buddhist totems, reflecting the country's many faiths and nationalities. And in Amman, the Jordan National Gallery of Fine Arts is appealing to its local and global audience. Among its permanent collection of more than 2,800 artworks are ceramics, paintings, and installations with Christian and Byzantine influences alongside Islamic calligraphy. Inclusive artistry, says the gallery's executive director, is critical for a globally conscious society.
If you look at the world now and you see most of the cultural and political crisis, it comes from the idea of not accepting the other. And by doing its mission to kind of represent and celebrate this plurality of cultures and worldviews, it helps people to kind of cope and understand and empathize with the other.
The Contemporary Museum says inclusion is also cross-generational, meaning it's important to appeal to youth who easily connect with art and artifacts in discussion, performance, and more importantly, as a community.
So you see, this theme of all religions coming together as one with tolerance, tolerating one another, including one another. This word tolerance and inclusion is going to be very famous next year. I mean, it is now, but next year it's going to be in a different level. That if you attempt to say anything against, there's so many wrong things about these two words, tolerance and inclusion. You are going to be labeled as a rebel. You're going to be labeled as anti-government. So if you refuse to fall or to align yourself with this inclusion, everyone is right thing. And even this climate change religion that I'm talking about, when you don't align yourself with it, same with this Abrahamic Family House, the vision, when you don't align yourself with it, you're going to be labeled as a rebel, you're anti-government, and then when you don't align yourself with these things, there are going to be fines that are set in place. It's going to begin with fines that are set in place. So if they say, for an example, nobody goes to work on Sunday and you go, there will be a fine that you have to pay. Or if ever you make a comment that they deem it's not inclusive, there will be a fine that you have to pay. So it's going to begin with fines, and after fines, it's going to be imprisonment. So it's going to escalate to imprisonment. If you don't fall in line, imprisonment. And then after imprisonment, because the Bible says that Mystery Babylon is drunk with the blood of the saints, when it reaches its climax, it's going to even go to an extent of death where people are going to be killed because of this. So basically, that's what we must look out for next year. We must prepare ourselves to be outlawed just because we say Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven. So we must prepare to pay fines because of the laws that they're going to put in place because of the climate change. So this is the narrative that they're creating. So we must prepare ourselves not to depend on our money. And we must also prepare ourselves to live in a situation where it's food shortage. What have you done? Okay, what are you doing in terms of preparing for food shortages next year? And what are you doing in terms of preparing to live in an environment that is anti-Christ? Because even this Abrahamic family house thingy, they said everyone can share their message except Christ. Even if we share Christ and we say it's the only way, they say that they're saying Christ is the only way is not allowed in that house. So are you prepared to live in an environment where people are refusing to say Christ is the only way? This is what we must prepare ourselves for next year. If you want to watch in detail the Pope's 10 new commandments, please click on the bottom left of your screen on this video. Or if you want to watch why I refused to take the vaccine, please click on the video on your bottom right. Thank you so much for watching. Shalom, shalom, shalom.